state, please find them. But in the interest of time, I am going to go to our next speaker because the speaker after that is on Zoom, and so I want to make sure that we get to her on time if we can. So these next two speakers are, I met them when I was in Maine at an immunization conference, and I thought they were amazing, and I decided, all right, I want them to come to Delaware, so I reached out and said, hey, do you want to come to our immunization conference? And they said, oh, I've never been to Delaware. So it is my honor to introduce you to two people who are coming towards the vaccination sphere from maybe not being quite so close to the vaccination sphere. First, we have Lydia Green. She was an anti-vaxxer for 12 years and wrote a story on her journey into changing her mind and bringing her 3 children up to date. She is now in nursing school to get into public health. Actually, you finished nursing school, like yesterday. And wants to deal with vaccine hesitancy on the front lines. And then after her will be Heather Simpson, is a mom who was popular in the anti-vax community as the mom who dressed as measles for Halloween, the least scary thing she could think of, and she also made multiple viral anti-vax polls on Facebook. So they're here today to tell you their stories and let us know what they're thinking.
Hello. Hello. My name is Lydia Green, and I am in here. I'm the Canadian half of Back to the Vax. Somebody said you could get anywhere in 24 hours. I want to politely disagree because I'm Canadian, but it took us a very long time to get here. I'm from a hamlet you've never heard of in the Canadian Rockies. It's a 5-hour drive to the nearest airport. And then after a few delays and a lot of sleep deprivation, I made it here, so hooray. I'm here to tell you my story about being an anti-vaxxer and how I got out of that. So I didn't start out an anti-vaxxer. Actually, before settling down to have a family, I used to be a quality control chemist for a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant. And I went to all my prenatal visits, I got a flu shot while pregnant, and I was planning to vaccinate my daughter. So like any new mom, I was struggling with my identity and my career change. I was now a stay-at-home mom. I lived in an entirely new community, lost my old circle of friends, and felt a little lost like a lot of new moms do. So this is kind of the beginning of the pipeline to the anti-vax world I ended up in. I like to mention that I had trouble breastfeeding, and I went to my doctor and I wanted advice, and he just said, don't be so brokenhearted. If it doesn't work out, there's formula. And so I turned online to figure out how to breastfeed my child, and I found a group called mothering.com, which is a natural parenting and attachment forum, and the advice they gave me worked. I may have been exposed to some anti-vax information, but I was still planning to vaccinate my child. It really didn't have an effect on me. So I took my daughter in, and I had some trepidation, but I still went through with it. My husband reassured me it was going to be fine. But I remember thinking, what if something happens, I can't undo it? That was the thought that was in my mind. I brought her home. Later that night, she started crying, a really high-pitched cry. And she was a good baby, so I didn't really know how to deal with that. I don't think I actually heard my daughter fully cry until that night. And she didn't want to nurse anymore, and she would sleep really deeply. And so I stayed up with her all night and called public health in the morning, and the public health nurse basically said, now you never want to say this, okay? You're just a first-time mom. And I was like, oh. And she said, it's probably nothing, but if you really believed it was terrible, you'd take her to the ER. And so I left that conversation still worried about my daughter and also feeling kind of embarrassed over the conversation that occurred. But I'm still not totally anti-vax at this point, but I go back to the people that helped me the first time I needed help. And what they told me was terrifying. They said, in the inserts, there's something called DTaP cry. It's cryoencephalitis. Your daughter probably had inflammation in her brain, and that's why she couldn't stop screaming. And it's in the insert, and that was enough to send me on a fact-finding mission. So I'm still not fully anti-vax at this point. Like, it didn't happen overnight. I was still planning to vaccinate my daughter with the other vaccines. And so I was trying to come up with an alternative schedule because the DTaP scared me so bad. I ended up taking her in Canada we do meningococcal for babies as well as pneumococcal. Skipped the Pentacell, the DTaP. She didn't even react. She was totally fine, but I was so scared at everything I heard from these anti-vax groups that I couldn't continue. She never got any vaccines when she turned 6 months old. And regrettably, I took her to a chiropractor for well checks because I was too afraid to go back to my doctor. I did have encounters with healthcare people, whether it be in my family. My husband's right there. His mother is a vaccine nurse for schools, so that was interesting. And I just never felt understood or heard, and always left the conversation feeling kind of embarrassed, shamed, and again, like, people don't want to take me seriously because I'm just a mom or just a housewife. And over the years, there were probably opportunities to talk some sense into me, where maybe if they were recognized as opportunities, it would have ended up a little differently. So I had 2 more kids. I did not vaccinate them either. You can see here on a form, this is the mothering. These are the posts I did on mothering. This one's back in 2016 where I'm considering vaccinating my daughter for travel purposes, but still didn't vaccinate her. So there were times, like, even if someone identifies as an anti-vaxxer, they're still considering it off and on over the years. The problem is they're asking their echo chamber the same question and getting the same answer. You can see here, I'm thinking about it. Happy to report I'm actually going to Japan with my daughter this summer, and we will be getting our travel vaccines. But it's crazy to me to think that there's a time where I wouldn't do that. So the important thing to notice here is that a lot of mothers are missing a sense of community. We don't have people to turn to, and sometimes our interactions with the people we're supposed to trust don't work out in our favor. And I always fell back to inaction, because inaction was working for me for years. Not vaccinating my kids didn't give me any negative consequences, thankfully, because there's herd immunity. So then the pandemic happens, and there is no vaccine at this time, so I'm not even thinking about COVID vaccination at all. But I'm thinking about a lot of what ifs. My parents are immigrants, they're from the former Yugoslavia. They've lived through an economy collapse, they know what that's like, and I've heard the stories. So my mind is going to, what if there's a world I can't actually access a vaccine? And would I want a vaccine for something like diphtheria if the infrastructure crumbles and we don't have proper sanitation? Like, my mind went all sorts of places. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm kind of a control freak. And so I start thinking about vaccinating my older kids, but there's also a trope, I believe, that the blood-brain barrier doesn't close until the age of 2 or 3. And so I started looking up what that age actually was. I wanted to know because my youngest was only 2 at the time. And speaking of TB, actually, my mother lost her mother when she was only 4 to TB, and her and all her siblings had TB. So it's kind of interesting that we talked about TB today, because that actually did affect my my own family at one point. So when I start researching, and I actually did my own research and not asked my echo chamber, I found out I was wrong about the blood-brain barrier, that babies are born with an intact, fully formed blood-brain barrier. And I had to really sit with that wrongness. It was really difficult psychologically to realize I was so wrong about something. And people can go one of two ways when they're confronted with something like that. They can either ignore it and dig their heels in further, or self-reflect and go on a fact-finding mission, and I'm glad I did that. I didn't dig my heels in. I decided to start stepping outside my echo chamber and reading the facts about vaccination. Because this is really not a tiny bit wrong, but really wrong, and I don't know how I believed that with no science. So along the way, I had to start vaccinating my kids. I found out I was wrong about all of the tropes I believe, not just one or two, and it didn't happen overnight. It took months and months of just reading and reaching out to people like yourselves without a chip on my shoulder, and just telling them my fears, telling them what I had believed, and accepting the information. And a lot of them really dug up a lot of good information for me. So one of those websites is called Vaxipedia, and they really go through the tropes quite well with references, with how the anti-vax movement frames these myths to make them look real. So that was a really good, I spent hours on that website, reading other people's anti-vax stories, knowing that there were people out there like me that changed their mind and they survived and their kids were fine. That was such a relief to hear, because nobody really comes forward when they make this mistake publicly, but there are some people that are crazy like me. And having a nurse work with me, that was gold. So I was still afraid that first appointment, to the point where I needed an Ativan to get through that appointment. And you'll find that a lot of people like me are anxious about everything they do with their children, not just the vaccines, the toys, plastics, Wi-Fi, like everything. We're just anxious, and we're looking for a point of control. So having a nurse work with me and say, you're in control, you do the vaccines you're comfortable with, I'll keep track of what's left. That's all it took. And so the first visit, I did just one for each of my kids. And I watched them like a hawk all night long. And then I saw that they were okay. And having that first experience of just seeing that they were fine led me to continue. But the other thing is that nobody wants to take their kids, to slowly draw out the vaccine schedule, because my kids were old. They were older. My youngest was 2, and I remember the second appointment, he saw the cartoon poster on the door, and I'm out of here. Just ran for the door, because he remembered. He was old enough to remember what happened there. And so quickly I was going from a slow vaccination plan to let's get as many done as possible per visit as fast as we can. My kids were caught up in a year, because the worst part about a vaccine is the poke. And one poke is just as traumatic as 4, at the end of the day, right? It's not going to be much more trouble. And so my kids were caught up quickly. And I was very fortunate to have experts who were very supportive and talked me down. There were certain trigger vaccines, I guess, because MMR has always been, and I'm sure you know, a bone of contention with the anti-vaxxers. So when MMR was due, I could call one of my friends who's a molecular biologist and just say, please talk me down. I know it's going to be fine, but I need you to tell me it's fine. So I was so fortunate. So back to the Vax is Born. I saw Heather talk. I think it was an article, and then I stalked her for a bit and tracked her down. So we decided to work together, because she was just starting to vaccinate her kids, and I was just finishing. And so I wanted to help her, support her through that, and we wanted to help support other parents through that. So it's a grassroots support movement. We don't claim to be experts. I never want to be in a position of an expert. We just support what the experts say. So we have a support group, a website, a page. We do a podcast where we interview experts on vaccination, so our group members can hear it directly from the expert. And we wanted to bring that same sense of community that we, as new mothers, were missing out on so much. So that was a key element for us. And we want people to vaccinate with confidence. There's a lot of groups out there that offer like slow vaccination, but it's under the guise that vaccines cause harm. So they still believe vaccines are poison, and they'll recommend things like detox. When we know if you have a functioning kidney and a liver, you don't need to worry about that. So we do not allow any of that rhetoric to be shared in our support group. Everything is evidence-based, and it's mostly for emotional support. We cheer each other on when parents, vaccinate their kids for the first time. The only reason people are allowed to vaccinate slowly is because they're anxious. And when we say that's fine, because it's, we've come a long way to even make that first appointment. So yeah, that's how Back to the Vax happened. I'm very proud of this movement we started. Our group has about 250 parents in it now, and I've got to see a lot of people through their first vaccinations. A lot of people wonder what they can do because it can seem a little hopeless at times. I know what wasn't helpful for me was when people would get upset or vitriolic toward my choices. I would shut down immediately, and nothing they said would get absorbed. So I know it's really hard now that I'm a nurse, especially when a patient is saying some kooky out there stuff, and you're like, okay, it's hard to have that poker face, but it's so important to show that you're listening and respectfully listen. And then ask questions. Sound like that's how a conversation happens with people. It's not just, I'm gonna talk at you and you have to be interested. There has to be a back and forth. So you ask them, where did you hear that? I'm so interested. I've never heard that before. You may have or you may not have. There's a lot of new myths being met every day. But that's the only way you're gonna find out about the myths, so that when it comes up again, to talk about them. Because I can tell you, I've talked about the things that I was worried about, and people had no idea what I was talking about, and it just validated my feelings more on my choice, not the opposite. And then also understand that people are going to Google. That's why in our booklet I have a way, it's okay to research, but you have to understand there's a hierarchy of evidence, right? And anti-vaxxers are professionally using that hierarchy the wrong way. It's the bottom of the pyramid. Those are the studies they're using. And if you don't understand that hierarchy, it sounds very convincing to them. My daughter went on new meds at one point, and my doctor actually told me to Google and bring what I found on Google to her, because that's how you stay ahead of the Google. It's not by saying, no, never do that, they're gonna do it. So just get ahead of it, and then you want them to bring what they hear to you so you can address it. And patience, I know we're all running thin on that, but you're not gonna fix everything in one visit. You want them to continue to talk to you about what they find. Call the office if they're scared. Having that support system for those first vaccines is so important. As I said before, it gets easier. When you bring your kids back, it gets easier each visit because you see that they're okay. That first visit can be almost impossible. I had one group member who couldn't make that first phone call. She's like, every time I make that first phone call to book my kids in, I can't. I made that phone call for her. I told her when, I told her where, and I talked to the nurse that was gonna see her kid. I said, this is her story. She just wants to see the same nurse so she doesn't have to explain her past and her history over and over. And that's important. Like, a lot of anti-vaxxers are afraid to be judged and have to say their story. So if they're deciding to vaccinate their kids, that's huge. And you want them to feel comfortable as possible. So another thing is, like, if you can't answer a phone, can you have an email? Everyone has email. The nice thing about that is that you'll get a catalog of how you answered these questions going. So when your next patient comes, you actually have that information right there. And nice, you can answer at your leisure as well. We're learning more about this in healthcare, being trauma-informed. Everybody has some form, you know, if you have any kind of chronic health condition, you probably have some kind of medical trauma. Patients will never forget how you make them feel, and you might forget about them at the end of the day, but they'll remember it. So it's very important to remember how our interactions can affect people long-term. And there's been a lot of confusing messaging out there regarding COVID. And there's a lot of experts looking to make $1 off of selling confirmation bias. So when your patient comes in and says, but Dr. Malone said this, that's true. Somebody with credentials said that. So what are they supposed to think? You can see how the trust in the healthcare system has been fractured. I think the conspiracy theories people believe about vaccination is a response to that trauma because people don't feel in control right now. And there is a study that shows that people who have a high ACE score are more likely to believe conspiracy theories and be anti-vaccine, especially regarding COVID vaccines, but any vaccine really. We have a long way to go, and I don't know, that's not very inspiring, but I think we have to change how we interact with people because the world is different now. It's not just, I'm an authority, do as I say. We have to understand that people are hearing multiple things from multiple sources, and it's really hard to know what's true and what isn't. Which is why we have to celebrate wins, no matter how small. You have a person comes in for one vaccine, that's huge. So I went from scientific career to total crunchy anti-vax mom to now licensed practical nurse. And I'm a masochist, so I plan to get my RN and potentially become a nurse practitioner. But for now, I'm a licensed practical nurse. I've come full circle, so it's possible, and it's because people were patient with me, and it's because they were willing to listen to my concerns. I've actually given a vaccine and not thought it was total poison, so people can change. There's a difference between vaccine hesitancy and being anti-vax. You're gonna have an easier time, you know, with someone who's just confused by all the messaging. So don't assume that they're anti-vaccine just because they have questions. There's so much information and misinformation. It's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. So that brings me to our booklet. You can see it's on the table. Heather and I wrote the booklet. We had it overseen by experts. It was about the most common things that we believed about vaccination and how we fell for it and how we realized we were wrong. Part of it, we wanted to maybe convince someone like us, but we also want it to be a preventative tool. Because I think if someone, you know, is having a baby and Auntie Lydia comes up to them at the baby shower and says, "Did you hear that vaccines cause autism?" And they read this ahead of time on how and why people believe that, and also why that's not true, Auntie Lydia is not going to get through to them. And so I really hope that this booklet can help people not go down the same path I did. We hope that it's kind of like an inoculation. of sorts against disinformation. Thank you so much for having me today. I am really glad I made this journey. I appreciate you letting me share my story. Thank you.
All right, Heather, you ready?
I've been thinking about those stairs this entire time, thinking, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip. And also, I'm not convinced that I'm gonna know how to turn this slides. Hang on. Do the what? Oh, you go down. Oh, duh. Okay, hi. Sorry, that was my worst fear and it just happened, so we got that out of the way. I'm Heather Simpson. I have no relevant relationships with ineligible companies to disclose. Okay. So, yes, I used to be a viral anti-vaxxer. Like an anti-vax influencer, which is probably the cringiest thing that one person can be ever. I never wanted to be that. I wanted to be a dentist when I was 5. This was never a dream of mine to become this. That's me trying to be the measles. Somebody at the time said it looked a lot more like syphilis, so she called me Syphilis Simp, and we're actually really good friends now, but it didn't make a lot of sense. I just was trying to get a kick out of it with my friends. You're supposed to be scary for Halloween, so I came up with the dumbest line ever. Was trying to think of the least scary thing I could be for Halloween, so I became the measles. It was just stupid. And that's how I found out about Reddit. I called my brother and I was like, I'm on the front page of Reddit, is that bad? Like, what is Reddit? And he was like, Heather, oh my God, this is your chance to get off the internet, save our family name, oh my God, please get off. So, but I stayed. And I stayed for like another year after that. There was a lot of ableism with my group of friends. You can see these posts. 1 million cases of measles in 2014. Oh wait, did I say measles? I meant autism. I mean, it's just rampant. It's awful. Who I actually was though, I was in West Texas. I was married at the time. My child had a lot of health issues. And just to quickly go into that, I brought her home from the hospital. When she was a few days old, we put a little oxygen monitor on her foot, and it went off at 70% oxygen. And I brought her to the ER, and they were like, there's nothing to see. I think it's probably just normal periodic breathing. Maybe you should just watch her wake up every couple hours and see if she's purple. But definitely don't use the little outlet sock because it's not FDA approved. Just check on her purpleness. So I literally set my alarm every 20 minutes for like 2 months. I was begging the pediatrician for a sleep study, and every doctor I saw said, have you tried calming down? Which, you know, ladies, that's always the worst thing somebody could say. But they just said, you're a new mom, it's fine, just, you know, she's fine. I finally got my pediatrician to give her a sleep study. We drove to Dallas. The sleep study doctor told me, you're just an anxious mom. She doesn't need a sleep study. Right at that moment, she fell asleep in my arms and did the weird periodic breathing. You know, periodic breathing is normal, but hers would last for hours until her oxygen got to 60%. So the doctor said, okay, just to calm your anxiety, we'll do a sleep study tonight, but this is just for you and I need you to know that because you have anxiety. So I was like, whatever. So she went into the sleep study for just a few hours at 2 months old. They stopped the sleep study. and transferred her to ICU because severe sleep apnea is 40 events per hour, and she clocked in at 144. After ICU, the follow-up, there was a student doctor standing in the room, and she asked about the outlet, and I said, yeah, it kind of saved her life. And she said, listen, I realized it saved her life, but it wasn't FDA approved. And I said, so she probably would be dead right now without it. And she said, I realized that, but it wasn't FDA approved. And right then I was like, ooh, screw the FDA, I do not want that. I don't want the CDC, I don't want anything to do with it. That's really where it started. I mean, I had decided not to vaccinate before then, and I'll get into that in just a second, but that was when the nail in the coffin really was hit. I didn't sleep much, my ex-husband worked a ton. I had no community support or family close by. I truly thought vaccines were going to kill my baby. I was also very scared of tetanus. That was a huge thing. I mean, she would scratch herself outside and I would Google tetanus for 3 hours. It was an equal fear, but I was like, she can't get the Tdap because she'll also die from that, so it was a nightmare. And Lydia said, a lot of conspiracy theorists are just based on fear. Absolutely, we're scared of everything, or we meaning I was. Red dye, plastic, everything was definitely causing cancer in my mind. So I was kind of jealous of my friends that could vaccinate their kids and then sleep at night, because it was kind of cool that they could be so normal and just live in a world where they trusted doctors and even politicians and they just slept and their kids were fine. I was just like, how are your kids fine? I was jealous. And I just want to say, the tip the scale thing, me being scared of tetanus and me being scared of the tetanus shot, I had to finally become more scared of tetanus than the tetanus shot, and that's what actually did the trick. It wasn't COVID itself, it was my child got scratched by a feral cat, and I went to the doctor in January 2021, and I said, I am so tired of being this worried about tetanus. I wish there was something we could do about this. This is ridiculous. And she was like, there's a shot for that. And that was a light bulb moment for me. I just kind of was like, what, it's fine. Okay, cool. How I went from getting all of my vaccines to hating them. I have 3 brothers. We got all of our shots. We hated them. We still are freaked out by needles, all of us. When that lady was showing the little needle things that go into your arm, little pinprick things, I was sitting with Lydia and I had to look away because I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna faint. So we are very scared of needles still, but we got them and nothing happened. I swear Facebook read your mind, because right when me and my husband started trying for a child, my ex-husband, an ad for the Truth About Vaccines popped up. It's a 9-hour docuseries. I recommend it as like something to do, just to know what all is out there, because it marketed itself as being in the middle, and it was definitely not. And it was doctor after doctor after doctor after presidential candidate just saying that vaccines cause definitely autism, but cancer, the common cold, flu, bad attitudes. I mean, pretty much everything was caused by vaccines. And that if you avoided them, you would save your child's life. We watched all of it, we took notes, and we were like, there's no way in heck that we are going to vaccinate our children. There's no way. We love our future children. Why would we do that? We're not actual monsters and murderers. Am I going backwards? See, I told you, this is not my screen. Okay, so what can be done? The response from medical providers. So like I said, we had decided not to vaccinate before I got pregnant. There was a lurking sense that maybe I'm wrong. My mom is very pro-vaccine, so she would say, what if Charlotte, my daughter, gets the measles and goes deaf or dies, or she would kind of put that in my ear. And so I always kind of wondered if I was wrong. But I just, as Lydia said, you know, inactivity seemed to be working, so that's why I just kept not vaccinating, and she kept not dying, and it was okay, but it was always kind of a little bit scary. When I was pregnant and I brought up my fears to my OB-GYN, and his response literally was, "You're not one of those crazy anti-vaxxers, are you?" And I just stood there like, I was so embarrassed, my face turned red. I never brought it up again, and I didn't get my Tdap when I was pregnant, I didn't get my flu shot. I was so embarrassed. Once my child was born, I brought up my fears of vaccines at her first appointment, and I brought up the docuseries, and my pediatrician said, "I won't discuss that. I won't discuss that series with you, I'm sorry." I keep going back to that. Isn't she cute though? Maybe that's what I'm going back to. What made me change my mind? That's like the question of the year. So COVID hit, and I started kind of getting cringed out by my followers because they made a big deal out of wearing a mask. They were like, "There's chemicals in the masks, and you can't take away my freedom." And I'm like, really? I mean, come on, it's a mask. So I kind of started standing up for masks because I just I thought I was pretty entitled to be that against it. Like there are actual real problems in the world, and this is what you're choosing to whine about, come on. And so they kind of started hating me, I kind of started going away from them, and slowly but surely, I kind of lost my anti-vaccine stance. They kind of started putting out rumors that I'm pro-vaccine, and I was like, well, I'm definitely not that, but I'm not entitled either. And I started thinking, you know, what if I am wrong? Maybe I should have kind of an open mind. So I messaged some scientists that I saw on Facebook and some doctors my questions. And I told them, hey, even if I wanted to be pro-vaccine, you can't solve my issues with vaccines. I mean, it's scientifically impossible. I know what I'm talking about, so you can't fix that. So they were like, try me. And then I started reading the vaccine book by Dr. Bob Sears. So I'm not a big reader, but the first part of the book just explains the side effects in a very realistic way. It does list like encephalitis, but it also lists how tiny of a chance of getting that there is. But I really appreciated how it wasn't a gaslighting type of book. It said this could happen, but these are the chances, instead of they're safe and effective and literally nothing will ever happen ever. So it was really, that gained my trust so much that I was like, wow, she could get the shot. And I mean, you're right, it's like getting struck by lightning 5 times in the same place. And I mean, those are the chances of this other side effect happening. The last part of the book, though, was when he talked about how bad vaccines were. But like I said, I'm not a big reader, so I didn't get to that part. So I have him to thank. That really, really helped me. But the big items that I believed that made me anti-vax. Gosh, I thought I spilled something. I didn't. We're good. Okay. So I asked one of the scientists. I said, okay, so me and my friends believe that aluminum. Lift it. I was like leaning into it. Okay. We believe that aluminum goes through the blood-brain barrier and causes inflammation and therefore autism. So what do you say to that? And he was like, well, all of those studies that your friends are citing, go to the methods section. Guaranteed they're gonna be talking about the aluminum found, or the environmental aluminum. It's never the vaccine aluminum. Vaccine aluminum is not fat soluble and is too big to go through the blood-brain barrier. It physically cannot do it. And I was like, okay. What about polysorbate 80? You know, that's in a lot of vaccines, and me and my friends also believe that it's kind of like a Trojan horse. It wraps itself, I don't know how to say it, what kind of envelopes the vaccine particles and gets them, I don't know, gets them through the blood-brain barrier, and then that's how they're able to enter, and then that's how the autism happens, through the inflammation and all that. So what do you say to that? And he was like, okay, yeah. I mean, there's some truth to polysorbate 80 opening up the BBB. So the reason why your friends are thinking that is because about 40 years ago, there was a study done that suggested that given enough polysorbate 80 injected straight into the carotid artery, you would have a chance at opening up the blood-brain barrier, which would be exciting for things like brain cancer, which we still haven't been able to use polysorbate 80 for. The key for all of that, though, is how much. You would need, given an average newborn, you would need about 3,600 doses of hepatitis B injected straight into the baby's neck to even have a chance of opening up the blood-brain barrier, which CPS would be there first, so, we don't need to worry about that. And then finally, formaldehyde. I started researching that because I was like, I'm not gonna inject literal poison into my child. The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is where I found this out. So basically, we need it for our metabolism, for the synthesis of DNA and amino acids. We need it to live. An average 2-month-old baby already has about 1,500 times the amount of formaldehyde in their circulation than they could be exposed to in any given vaccine. So that's not really something to worry about. Those were my 3 big worries, and they were just completely taken down. I can't handle this right now. Oh, yeah, that's okay. She's still mad at me over that. But what helped me the most is on her first shot day, my pediatrician let me text him for any reason whatsoever. I don't always recommend this. I don't know if you want to let your patients have your cell phone number. But he knew the situation specifically, and I watched her like a hawk, and he was like, you can ask me anything about like anything crazy, just text me. And I was like, yeah, I probably will. But I actually don't think that I did at all, because she had more energy and more of an appetite than ever before after her shot that day. So yeah, it worked out, but it was really nice having him, available. Oh, Dr. Paul Offit, I kind of call him my vaccine grandpa now. He let me call him that day, and I probably sounded so completely unhinged on the phone. But he was like, you know what, it's okay to be nervous. Like, most parents are nervous because it's their children, it's your entire child, and it's a medical procedure or whatever, but she's gonna be fine. She really is. And just, I didn't like him when I was an anti-vaxxer. I thought he was one of the Satan people. But hearing him and just knowing I could trust doctors that have children that they've vaccinated, that was a big game changer. Like, they care about their own kids, they care about mine. Like, these people are not evil. Okay, so this one is kind of controversial, but it's important to me. Allow the slow schedule, especially at first. If my doctor had made me inject, 6 different things into my baby the first day, I would not have done it, and I would not be here right now. That point blank, just no. He let me start one at a time. A lot of doctors kick their patients out if they don't follow the CDC schedule, and I do understand that, but the patients will probably find a group of anti-vaxxers online or a chiropractor, and then all of a sudden, instead of once a month shot or once every other month shot, even though it's annoying and it's slow, you have a completely unvaccinated 5-year-old as opposed to a fully vaccinated 5-year-old had you allowed the slow schedule. So, oh, okay, that's for books are use us and other resources. Yeah, we just kind of take all the fears that we used to have and that we've heard and put them into normal people words instead of smart, hard to understand words. So we had fun with that project. This is the code to scan if you don't have the book, but everybody does, so cool. Okay, so finally, don't lose hope. I wanna add something real quick that is a little bit concerning to me. That's not on this slideshow. currently, and I don't know if anybody realizes this, but in Texas, and I don't know if it's just a Texas thing, almost every pharmacist I've talked to is not getting the COVID shot and is telling me not to. I just wanted people to be aware of that, and that I'm running into a lot of nurses that are discouraging it. And I'm not listening to that, but they are telling people that, and that's a major problem that I'm seeing. I'm horrified by it. I had one that was like, I don't trust it, I'm waiting. And he's very pro-vaccine. I'm just seeing this everywhere, and it's really kind of becoming a big problem. Another thing is to know before your patient asks. My OB/GYN didn't know what polysorbate 80 was. That made me instantly lose trust in him completely as a person. So just, this book will help, but just knowing, or even saying, I don't know, but I can find out. That's better than, are you a crazy anti-vaxxer? And again, there's me. Up at the top in 2019, I think it was the World Health Organization's list of top 10 global health threats, and anti-vaxxers made the list, so I made a t-shirt. And here I am now, so don't lose hope. No one is untouchable, no one is unbreakable. Every single patient has a deep fear that can be found, touched, and melted away. Please don't give up on anyone, because they can, you take the measles costing girl, and I'm standing here today. And if that can happen, then I think anyone can change. So, thank you.
Think to have that kind of information that is an amazing information. I always think that you need to just confront the fears of the people. And then talking as a Hispanic, if you see that in your community, you can imagine Hispanics, they are more afraid about this. Do you have this option in other languages
We
or just
do.
one in English?
We have it. We have a Spanish version at the
Great.
website. Yeah,
Great.
they did it. They did a translation.
Yes, we have a Spanish version, that's what she's saying. Good question.
I'm sorry, I only printed out the English version.
Do you still keep in touch with the anti-vax people? Do you try to educate them with your experience?
I do. Some of my best friends are anti-vax. The villain never sees themselves as the villain, and so we both want to keep our kids safe. And it's been really good. Like, I've been able to see their side, they've been able to see mine, and I actually had a friend that started vaccinating, and that was kind of cool, and she was a big anti-vaxxer.
What helped you get through to your anti-vax friend that made her change her mind?
The question is, what helped you get through to your anti-vax friend to make her change?
Basically, at the time it was the COVID deaths. I'm not sure what it would be now, but what I've seen now with one of my anti-vax friends is she'll say, oh, so-and-so collapsed on the football field, or yeah, that was very specific. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of, some news story, and it has to be from the COVID vax, and then I'll say, okay, well, what else could it be from? Let's open it up. There are things that exist outside of the COVID vaccine, and then we kind of go from there.
I like to say that life still happens after vaccination. So when people say, I heard this happened, I heard that happened. Sorry.
I like to say that life still happens after vaccines. Vaccines don't prevent every cause of illness or death, just the specific disease you're vaccinating for. So you can get vaccinated and get hit by a car. It doesn't mean that vaccines cause car accidents. And there's a base rate of all kinds of illnesses and health problems, and we look for signals that go above that base rate, and that's how we know a vaccine causes it, and we're not seeing that. So it's kind of, it takes a minute to explain But it's worth explaining that, and then I just let people know, like, yeah, of course these things are happening, and we're just hyper aware now, but life still happens after vaccination. We have evidence of these, you know, the whole sudden death thing, the cardiac arrest. There's studies going back to like the 70s and 80s about young people, you know, having cardiac events, athletes specifically. So it's not a new phenomenon, but people think it is because they've never heard it before. But yeah, I just like life still happens.
All right. Thank you, ladies. We are going to take a very quick break. Very quick. I want to just try and start as close to 4:30 as we can because our next speaker is zooming in. So let's come back by 4:35 so that we can get started, please.
Your name? I'm gonna always